Welcome to Implicating the Real. My name is Michael. I'm joined by my good friend Joe. Joe, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Hello.
And we're excited to have our other good friend Liana with us today. How are you, Liana?
Excited to be here.
We're doing chapter 4 of Seth Speaks. It's titled Reincarnational Dramas. I think this is a kind of a good one.
A lot of dramas.
Yeah.
Dramas not in the sense that there's going to be a lot of like tea being spilled, but dramas in the sense of like plays.
It's kind of using that as a metaphor of like part of reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
You guys want to just jump right into it?
Sure. Yeah.
Just blatantly right off the top, he says, consider your present self as an actor in a play. Hardly a new analogy, but a suitable one. Here he says the scene set in the 20th century, that's when this was written. So here we are in the 21st century. You create the props, the setting, the themes. In fact, you write, produce, and act in the entire production. You and every other individual who takes part. He just goes on from there.
Mm-hmm. And that's like most of the chapter is this extended metaphor, right?
Yeah.
This idea that like you are putting on a play for yourself and you're acting out the play for yourself. But there's like specific parts about it that's like important to know about because it changes how you might think about real life in terms of the metaphor.
Yeah, we're kind of like coming from the perspective of the actor who is realizing we're in this play, right?
Right.
Is this a new idea to you, Joe, at all?
Well, I mean, I've read my Shakespeare.
Yeah.
So I know that all the world is a stage and the people on it merely players, Michael.
You said it's hardly a new idea. I guess it was a dumb question then.
But no, I mean, for me, reading this chapter, because of my hobbies, tend to read a lot of this stuff in terms of like role-playing games, like tabletop role-playing games. Because like Fun Joe lore, I've been in several D&D campaigns in my day, and I'm in one currently right now. So I've had a lot of experience with, role-playing as a character. And for me, that's what, a lot of this seems to sort of echo. The idea of you have a story that you're actively creating and you have a role that you have to play in it. But you're sort of responsible not just for your role, but for the rest of the world too at the same time.
Yeah.
Right?
You have a unique perspective.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think D&D was like is a widespread thing that Seth could have pulled that out as a metaphor, but I think most of our listeners are at least familiar with the concept. Or should we explain it a little bit?
We can explain it for people that don't know. It's pretty pop culturally relevant now, but if you've never played Dungeons and Dragons or a different role-playing game, essentially you are going to play a character that you come up with at the beginning of the game, and you decide what your character's background is going to be. So for example, right now I'm playing a paladin who is an evil paladin who worships the god of vengeance, right? So his character motivations are that he has this grudge that he wants to seek vengeance for. He has a motivation in the world. And you can find out things about the character in D&D, at least based on the stats that they have. So I know how strong he is. I know how smart he is. I know how good he is at talking to people. And those things are different from me. I'm not as big and strong as my paladin is in the game.
Mm-hmm.
But in the rules of the game, you can enact things on the world, just like we can enact things on our world, right? But when you're negotiating these things, you're responsible for the things your character says and does. You sort of have the final say of what your character does, is one of the rules of role-playing games. So there's a thing that's called a dungeon master, or a game master if you're not playing Dungeons and Dragons. So your DM or your GM is the world. They're the person who tells you what there is in the world. They're the one who sets up the conflicts for you.
They're kind of like a third party because they're not taking on a character directly, right?
They don't take on a character directly, but they are the one who kind of sets the rules of the game and tells you what things there are out there for you to explore. And they have a lot of freedom in being able to change things and make things however they want, but they do have limitations specifically in that they are not supposed to tell you what you do. You have the freedom to tell them what you do with the world they give you, And there's this constant negotiation that has to happen between these two people, right? For the game to be able to work in the creative way that it's supposed to.
This is all very Sethian.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe with the exception of the game master, maybe there's an analogy there. It's not coming to me, but like,
Well, the entity could be the game master, you know?
I
perhaps.
figured the entity was each player,
Oh, that's true. The entity is the player.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and your paladin would be your human self.
So
That'd be me. That'd be Joe.
yeah, so like
Yeah.
Seth is saying that what we think of as reincarnational selves, sort of a lot of our culture buys into this idea, and most of our culture has heard of it. But he's saying that these are all simultaneously happening. So to extend from the D&D analogy, that would be like if you were playing multiple games at the same time.
Which often happens.
Yeah, you'd be an entity. You would have all these other selves. Those selves, those players or individuals in that game might think of the other players that you're playing as happening in the past or the future, but they're all happening at the same time.
Right. Yeah. Because from the entity perspective, time is an illusion, right? It's all like simultaneous to their perception.
Yeah. And the other, analogous aspect, I think, is the co-creation of it all. So you have to like negotiate with these other players and the game master. Seth is saying this more or less takes place like while we're deep in sleep. We're kind of like making adjustments and deciding on the events for the next day.
Right.
Agreeing as a group what we should do before we move forward.
Yeah. And, people have this experience, right, where you'll have like an important encounter where you're like, let's go talk to this person. And all of a sudden they say one thing and then the whole party backs up out of the shop and they're like, okay, what do we want to say? Blah, blah. And then the person goes back in and does something, right? Like, yeah, I feel like the co-creation is a really important part, right? Because if there wasn't co-creation, then we get this, and I'm talking here about our actual reality, like the metaphysical thing. If there wasn't co-creation in our actual world, then we would fall into this problem of like the solipsistic trap, where I would be in this room, but I would be the only person in this room, right? You two would be just emanations of me deciding what you would do.
That's a good point.
Right. But because it's co-creative, it's not solipsistic.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's distinctive from like other games in the sense that you're like have total creation of the game itself to some extent, I guess. Not total, it might be a little strong, but like
It's
you
pretty
create your
close.
own world, right?
It's pretty close.
Yeah.
Like one of the critiques people have had recently of role-playing games is that the rules heaviness of it is the thing that limits you, because you really are only limited by your imagination and the rules of the game.
Yeah.
So recently, a lot of more like, innovative styles of role-playing games have been very rules light, because the idea is you just want to give people the ability to be as imaginative as possible and not have any rules that like limit what they're going to do.
What about like just the overall objective?
Yeah. And like, even in terms of that, like often that's one of the most important things to do is give people a direction, because like otherwise it's hard to channel creativity. But like sometimes like setting your own objective is totally a thing that's on board for players to do as opposed to game masters to do, I play with this one group that's a really big fan of like very large sandbox games where the world is very well fleshed out and like created for you. And the person that runs it has been running this world for a very long time. But her only imperative for players is she says like, you arrive, you get washed up on this coast and everything in the world is off to the west of you. You arrive from the ocean on the east. And then that's it. You have to decide what you want to do in the world, And that's a very big and open thing to be able to do.
Very open-ended.
And if there's something that you want, it can get plopped down in the world somewhere for you because it's so big. You just kind of have to say that you want it.
Very cool. All right. Well, let's bring that back in as we go here.
Yeah.
Each of you are now involved in a much larger production in which you all agree on certain basic assumptions that serve as a framework within which the play can occur. The assumptions are that time is a series of moments, one after the another, that an objective world exists quite independently of your own creation and perception of it, that you are bound within the physical bodies that you have donned, and that you are limited by space and time. Other assumptions accepted for the same reason include the idea that all perception comes through your physical senses, that information comes from without and that no information can come from within. So he's just kind of laying like, these are the rules of the game we're playing.
Yeah, these are the rules of the game.
But they sound really like they could also describe D&D.
Yeah, right? All that they need to put in here is, give a description of like, well, here's how you roll the D20 to determine, such and such. And then you're there,
I want to like imagine like a D&D character that's like questioning reality.
Oh, you can,
Ooh.
that'd be cool.
And then they get to the point where like, I feel like there's another level of reality that we're not quite aware of.
The existential crisis, right?
Yeah. Does it ever get like that meta?
I feel like there's a lot of space for it in that a lot of characters have sort of access to this like higher truth, like you can play a cleric, for example, right? And you can like be wandering towards the god that you worship. And there's some sense in which like you as the player are sort of filling in for that.
Interesting.
Where like you can have your cleric be like despairing over like this village that just got like murdered
Mm-hmm.
and like crying out like, why does this need to happen?
Right.
While you're looking at the DM who's the one who just made it happen, like there's definitely room for that kind of like real drama of like the existential, like what is the purpose of this, in this world that I'm living in?
And it's often like those sorts of tragedies that like begs the question, right? Like when you have to start asking like, what is happening? Why is this happening?
Yeah.
And you can see how they could come up with all sorts of explanations, but like literally in that context, the explanation is that there's these higher beings that are like,
we're trying to play a game, man.
taking this out.
We think it's fun.
Yeah. And it's fun. Is it fun in the same way that like, like young children playing is fun?
That's the closest thing I would liken it to is if whenever, listener, if you were a kid and you played the like what if game, where somebody just says, what if blah, blah, blah happened? And then someone says, oh, well, what if then this thing? And then, oh, well, what if this thing? That's what it is. That's literally what it is.
And what does our society say about like, what is the reason like that is fun for children? It's like orienting them towards like growth and development, right?
I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's just exercise. I would say that it's just exercising imagination, which I think is severely underutilized in adults.
Yeah. I agree. I think more adults would benefit from being able to think that way because I think kids do it like very naturally.
Yeah. And as a child, you're kind of trying on different identities, figuring out who you are, what you want to be.
Wouldn't that fall into growth and development?
Yeah.
Trying things on. Because you're often like kids are like playing house or they're like,
yeah, dollhouse.
Without even conceptually understanding what their parents do, they're like emulating them. They're like,
they love playing like dress up.
Yeah.
Is like one of the things that I find so remarkable with kids is if you just give them like the fewest little pieces of like costume, especially if it like emulates something that's seen as important in their society.
Yeah.
Kids love dressing up as like firefighters, doctors, like if it's a respected job that to them is a thing they can only imagine what it's like to be one, they'd love dressing up as one and trying to imagine what it's like.
That reminds me of playing cops and robbers as a kid. You get really into it.
All you needed is a stick and it was a gun, right? But it makes me think of like Seth uses the metaphor of like donning clothes as like beliefs sometimes. And you can see how like just like a hat or a stick or a prop or any kind of clothes it's donning an idea or a belief system. It's like, I'm putting this on and I'm going to experience the world through these ideas.
Well, and to move it even further, like kind of into interesting psychological territory, like there's also a lot of cultures where this is like therapeutic or like incredibly spiritually important practice, right? Like that you can put on a costume and you become a spirit, right? Or you become this like monster from the forest, or you become like some animal or something like that. Like
so this is in ritual.
During ritual,
yeah.
And like you act out as if you are this being and you stop becoming yourself for that period of time,
Yeah, that's
where
very
like
cool.
Yeah, and there's definitely examples of cultures in which adults don't lose out on this thing. They just kind of continue it into the adult mode. I guess the closest thing for white American culture would be like sometimes you have to dress up like Santa, right? And for a little while you have to be Santa. You're not you, you know?
It's sad that like that's maybe like one of our only versions of that.
There's Halloween and Dungeons and Dragons.
It's Halloween, there's Dungeons and Dragons.
And every role-playing game.
Yeah.
Video games.
Oh, and video games. Yes. I didn't even think about that yet.
And theater, I suppose. To a degree.
Oh, 100% theater. Well, because like there's people, you know, there's like Dada or whatever, where they saw theater as being like, you know, socially transformative, where like you can act out this kind of like performance, but in acting it out, you're actually changing reality, you know? It's not just performance.
Yeah. I like the container for like some of those traditional rituals though, that they like really give you an open avenue to like access like things that are super primal. Like our versions, everything we're listing from Santa Claus, like you could probably get pretty creative with Halloween and go there, but like to like have a ritual where it's on the same level as like taking a psychedelic or something, it can be that kind of transformative thing. Like I'm thinking, I go to dance church once a week, which is just, you know, like
it's like church, but you dance.
A sober hippie dance party on Sunday morning. Yeah.
It's
it's very meditative. Like you just get to a place, like one of the rules is there's no talking on the dance floor and there's no cell phones. And so you're just in this place where it's like, feels really non-judgmental and you can just take it wherever you want.
Yeah.
It's a vestige of one of those old rituals that our former cultures had.
Yeah.
How was that birthday party you went to where you had to dress up like all corporate and stuff? Did you guys actually role play it out?
We did.
Oh, nice.
We did role play it out. I went there and yeah, so I went to a birthday party where my friends who are not all very professional people had to dress up as professional as possible. And it was going to be a corporate get together for all of our friend group. The first thing we did is we all had to make ourselves different job titles. So I think I ended up being like the CFO of like analytics or something. But it was really funny. Like the one person that showed up late, we made her be the intern, and then we did bully her the entire time as if she was an intern.
Nice.
I know we ended up talking to the people at the golf place who seemed to actually believe that we were like a corporate group. So then we started telling them about all our different branches, like, oh, so-and-so came from Chicago and so-and-so's all the way out in Texas and blah, blah, blah.
There you are again, like co-creating out in the real world.
It was great.
That's cool.
Yeah. But no, I think that's a good direction too, is just noticing that like in just the same way as like kids find dressing up as a profession like interesting and like fun, there's a certain way in which like I would say professionalism is just also kind of that, you know? It's like you put on a suit and then you act a different way. Like all of a sudden you're taking on a different role. And magically, it allows you to have more access to certain things. It allows you to have more power over other people. Whereas like in the normal quote unquote everyday real world, you can't go like order people around on the street. But all of a sudden when you're in a corporate environment and you're like, you know, you have a name tag on and you have a tie, all of a sudden you can. And it's like, where does that power come from, you know?
It's almost like cathartic to an extent.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, like, if your friend who was late is chronically late, how many people there were like, oh my God, I've always wanted to call her out for being late, but I can't. But now I can by pretending that she's just the intern and I'm her boss.
Right. It's just a game, but it's not just a game at the same time.
Yeah, like some real emotions are like getting worked out, some real expressions of things.
Right.
Very cool.
Yeah.
It's talking about the plays seem to be taking place one before the other, and so these communications seem to intensify the false idea that time is a series of moments passing in a single line from one inconceivable beginning to some equally inconceivable end. This leads you to think in terms of very limited progress, both in individual terms and in terms of your species as a whole. And later he says, progress does not exist in the terms that you consider it to any more than time does. Each play, both individually and in mass, different problems are set up. Progress can be measured in terms of the particular ways in which these problems were solved or not solved. Seems like it applies pretty closely to what we're talking about with D&D.
Well, I had sort of wanted to ask you guys about this idea of like progress being sort of not, it says progress not in the terms that you consider it. So like, is this perspective like anti-progressive? And I mean that in the sense of like, it doesn't see history as having directionality or like goal-orientedness.
I don't think that's exactly what he's getting at here. But like history might be like a separate, that's like our grander collective problem that we're working with. And that might get into like what we're talking about with like the ideas of good and evil. You know, like
Yeah.
that sorting out what those things mean and what morality is might be part of what we're doing on that grand collective level.
Did you read from the bottom of 48? Is that where the part of that came from?
That's where, yeah, it kind of ended up.
Can I read the larger context?
Yeah,
of it?
go ahead.
I think I really like this part, I guess. It says, this leads you to think in terms of a very limited progress, both in individual terms and in terms of your species as a whole. You think those of you who have even considered reincarnation, well, certainly the race must have progressed from the time of the Middle Ages, although you greatly fear it has not. Or you turn to technological progress and say, well, at least we have come a long way in that direction. You may smile and think to yourself that it is quite difficult to imagine a Roman senator addressing the multitudes through a microphone, for example, his children watching his performance on television. But all of this is highly misleading. Progress does not exist in the terms that you consider it to, any more than time does. I thought that thing with the Roman senator was so interesting because, like, I think it really speaks to the idea that there is just sort of like one characteristic like humanity, right?
Mm-hmm.
That has existed through time. But like, in my understanding of human nature, maybe, it seems very normal that you could imagine like a Roman senator using a microphone. Because when a Roman senator is out there like yelling, you know, to a crowd, he's doing the same thing that senators nowadays do. It's just now we have microphones. But that's like, you know, the point about technological progress, right? That like, well, at least we've changed things in terms of technology.
Yeah, you can see it like that doesn't add too much, or it doesn't really change like the intellectual abilities of a particular senator.
Yeah, it doesn't change the human soul, you know,
Yeah.
in that much of a big way. And that like maybe in almost like a culturally relativist way, like our culture values technology because that's what our culture values. But if you ask the Roman senator, is this progress? They might say no, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's quite telling the phrasing that Seth chose of at least we have come a long way in that direction, implying we're scrounging for any sort of progress. Like, hey, maybe they had better work-life balance back then or healthier food, but like now we don't, but at least we have better technology.
Yeah, at least we have iPhones.
Mm-hmm. Which speaks to like, you know, progress is not necessarily what we think it is.
Yeah.
And the fast advance of like this sort of technology kind of helps lend that false impression that we're like, we are making progress. We are obviously, I'm smarter as a person than someone, you know, 800 years ago was as a person. It's not necessarily true.
Right.
They're just dealing with a different world, you know, like in the D&D sense, like there's just a different set of things that make up their environment.
Right. Yeah. And then, you know, it just goes on to emphasize like, you know, in different times, different problems come up. And it's just kind of like people just have to deal with whatever is the problem of their day, you know?
On the next page, it says, these plays are highly spontaneous affairs in which the actors have full freedom within the play's framework. And granting these assumptions that have been stated, there are no rehearsals. There are observers, as you will see later in our book. As in any good theater production, there's an overall theme within each play.
The observers thing is kind of ominous.
Yeah.
Who are the observers?
I think what he's saying is just like other entities like Seth. And I think that translates pretty directly to our D&D analogy.
Yeah. I mean, some people make their living off of doing it for an audience.
Right. I don't know if there's actual observers, you know, like you have friends that aren't playing the game, that are just hanging out and watching the game.
Right.
I don't know if that's what he's saying or if it's just other entities that have, you know, selves participating in these worlds that are observing. I don't know. Find out when we get there, I guess.
Yeah.
I figured it was like when Jane wrote those worldview books, you can tap into anyone's like specific life or view.
Yeah.
that information is available for all.
But who's tapping into ours? Who's observing ours?
Anybody who wants to.
Yeah.
What are these books?
Oh, like the William James and the Cezanne books that I brought up. Like she did the Cezanne book for Rob's Christmas present,
Right.
and the William James book, which I've read that, and that's very Sethian.
So presumably, like when you are living out your life, you're sort of like maybe like writing the story of what your life is, and like any other person in theory can pull that down off the bookshelf and read it.
Yeah.
Whoa, that's kind of wacky.
Yeah, there's some other place where he's hinting at that we can, this is all available to everyone kind of thing.
Like this available to just like normal people, as long as you're like connected enough to like your entity or whatever.
Yeah.
Whoa. I guess that's how like channeling works, huh? Or like not channeling, that's like how doing the past life stuff works. If you have somebody that's gonna like do the past life regression for you, they're sort of helping you tap into it.
Yeah. And also possibly remote viewing,
Oh,
which is the practice of acquiring information that is geographically distant from you.
yeah. So you're sort of leaning on other people's experience to like get the information because
Sometimes not. Sometimes there's no one at what you're viewing.
but there's still something that you can sort of like grab onto to
Mhm.
take a look at.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Our government funded this, I don't remember which decade, but they had a decent amount of luck with it, viewing like Russian sites.
Yeah, I remember hearing that there was like a pretty extensive program for it. I bet you they're still doing it.
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, if it gave them some sort of leg up, I'm sure they still are.
Yeah.
Says the great artist, for example, did not emerge out of a particular time simply because they were born into it or the conditions were favorable. This is coming right after the previous thing I read, saying that there is an overall theme within each play. The play itself was concerned with the actualization of intuitive truth into what you would call artistic form, with a certainty of such vast and sweeping results that it would serve to awaken latent abilities within each actor and to serve as a model of behavior. Periods of renaissance, spiritual, artistic, or psychic, occur because the intense inner focus of those involved in the drama are directed towards those ends.
I thought this was such an interesting idea.
Yeah.
It's like if we think of like the Renaissance, right? For us, like that we've been taught in like a Western tradition, it almost like frames that time and place like it's like a festival, you know?
Yeah.
Where it's like all of these like creative minds kind of decided like, well, what time period and what place should we all meet up to do cool stuff? And they're like, how about, Italy in like whatever time period? Like we'll all meet there in lives at the same time so we can do a bunch of crazy shit together,
Yeah. This kind of happened naturally, but like I'm just can't get away from the D&D analogy. It's like you and your friends, we want to do this like specific thing. And to us, that's like this moment in our history. But like, it was just you guys wanting to do that. Tense focus on a particular thing.
Right. And that's sort of just like the Sethian idea is like any sort of turn in culture where there's just this intense focus. It's like, well, that's because people decided like that's where it's going to be. Like that's what we want to do.
And to continue on what we were just saying, like it serves to awaken latent abilities within each actor and serve as a model of behavior. So like that is in what we think of as history. Therefore, it's available to us. We can get inspired by that time. We can see what they've created. We can like, jump off from where they got to.
Yeah.
Cool. Each play is entirely different from any other. It is not correct, therefore, to suppose that your actions in this life are caused by previous existence, or that you are being punished in this life for crimes in the past. The lives are simultaneous. Starts to get into like Seth's distinction from like our own ideas of like karma.
Right, because that's what somebody might think about if we're talking about like past lives and reincarnation is you're probably going to think about karmic, reincarnation.
This idea that there's some like determinism happening and some justice. Everything like balances out in the end.
So like in this version, like you're not going to have to live as like a spider because you were a shitty person, or you're not going to get to be a really rich person because you lived a good life as a poor person or something like that. Like, that's kind of not how this works.
Yeah, he doesn't explain it totally in this chapter, but elsewhere he says that if you were a perpetrator in this one life, in your higher being, you may very well likely want to experience the other end of that. So it's not like a determined thing, but from this perspective, you see the value in experiencing the other side of the coin, and you can take a life where you are a victim in the way that you victimize someone else. But you don't have to. And even he'll say, even once you've done that, you're not bound to like continue living a torturous life.
Why is that?
Because free will always operates. Once you get the value that you were seeking out of that experience, you can choose something different, or you could die and just, have a different experience.
Is that your higher self that decides you've had enough, or is that like you as like the physical instantiation?
I think it's you.
It's both.
Yeah, that's a better answer.
And that sort of like explains how like people can be living really like unfortunate, unhappy lives and then sort of like turn their life around. It's like, well, the moment they turn their life around is when some part of them decided like, okay, I've had enough of this. Like, I'm gonna just try to like see what this life can be like, but in like a positive sense, sort of.
Yeah, but Seth also says that like cause and effect is a myth,
Oh,
because you create your reality based on your thoughts, beliefs, and expectations, not because of what happened to you in your past in this life or in your past in a previous life.
so your past in your current life doesn't have any necessary connection to your present in your current
It
life.
has a connection, but it's not a direct cause and effect connection that most people feel we're bound by.
Gotcha.
It's the connection is more like this event happened. Oh, I'm going to acquire these beliefs as a result of that. Now these beliefs moving forward create my reality now.
Interesting. I'm just trying to think if you could reprogram somebody midlife,
Oh, for sure. I think you could.
Yeah. Just by like adopting like a radically new
Yeah.
set of beliefs. Like, I guess the D&D example would be like, sometimes you let somebody borrow your character sheet because you can't show up for a session. And then they try to play you as best they can, but they don't make the same decisions you make all the time.
That's interesting.
Because it's like, I suppose maybe that's different though, because for the whole reality creation to happen, there sort of has to be this connection between like your self and the higher entity and all of that. And it's like you couldn't just sever from the entity and get connected to another entity. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Might be able to.
Really?
That's an interesting question.
Get adopted by a new entity?
Yeah.
What?
Seth said that he was once part of the same entity as Jane and Rob, but not anymore.
That's right.
But it wasn't that he like handed it off to someone else. It just like they grew apart or chose
he
different ways.
Branched off to do something, yeah.
Because that's part of like what you're supposed to do to like spiritually ascend, right? Is you like bud off?
I don't think it's ascension. It's just if you want to do it, if you think it's fun, do it. It's not like any better or worse.
It's just like
Exploration and curiosity.
they were roommates and then he's like, I want to live on the other side of town, and just kind of like left.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, we talked about like the higher Joe entity playing with this little Joe doll.
Yeah.
Now the little Joe doll wants to become its own entity, and it has the opportunity to become so. And so like right now, you and all your reincarnational lives, or your past and futures as we would call them. So like, yeah, you and your other reincarnational selves are part of that one entity now. But like if you decide to become your own entity, then you will no longer be part of the same entity as you and like your past life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's kind of what's happening there. I don't know if like in the sense where you're playing a D&D game and you're like, oh, I gotta go. You can play my character for me while I'm gone. Because I feel like the going, like Seth is saying, like the entity or the inner self is literally like the energy that makes the character there. And I don't know if that's like something you just pass off to a different identity.
Yeah.
I think in a larger sense, it's like the entity doesn't need like a break.
They don't need to go on a pizza run or whatever.
Yeah. This is the multidimensional self is learning the art of actualization. It has within it infinite sources of creativity, unlimited possibilities of development, but it has yet to learn the means of actualization and must find within itself ways to bring into existence those untold creations that are within it. Therefore, it creates varieties of conditions in which to operate and set itself challenges. All of this is done with great spontaneity and unbounded joy. Reminds me of like that burden of like working out your own identity.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have all this, like you have unlimited possibilities of development and means of actualization, but you have like all these kind of intentions within you that just need a place to flower.
It reminds me a lot of in chapter 3 when we talked about play, and how like important like play is with like creativity and spontaneity and all of this.
Yeah. He says this a few different ways, so I might repeat myself, but each actor must of himself realize, however, the nature of production and his part in it. He must actualize himself out of the three-dimensional confines of the play's setting. So it's sounding like no matter what problems we're working out by taking on these sorts of experiences, like the ultimate experience is like realizing what's really happening and coming out of it, which I think is really cool. So like if you're playing D&D, like there's all these like stories and experiences that are unfolding, but like we could say in an ultimate sense, like the role of each individual, character in the game is to realize they're in a game and to like transcend their experience back into the people in the real world.
Why is that? Because it seems to me that like there's a space in which, if we're talking about D&D or even if we're talking about like a play or something, like having a satisfying narrative arc seems to be the goal of a lot of characters. Like I was talking to you before, right, about my current character, that I've been struggling recently with whether or not this character should die, right?
For a while now, I feel like.
For a while now,
Yeah.
I've been trying to contemplate his death because I feel like it's most narratively satisfying for him to die at this moment. And it's like he doesn't ever get to the, transcendental experience of like what he is and what he actually means in the story because his character is very conceited and self-absorbed and evil.
Yeah.
And him dying evil is kind of part of the point of who he is. So like for me, the greater entity, the player, the thing that I'm getting out of the experience is telling the story. But that doesn't require the character to be able to do that, So I wonder why it's the case that like we as people have this sort of direction towards understanding who we are and not simply living a satisfyingly narratively coherent life,
I think both are valid, but yeah, it is an interest. It's challenging to me, that question. Why? Does anything come to mind?
I think we have a meta goal, like a meta goal here,
Yeah.
which Seth has said that when you realize your thoughts create your reality, you're done. You don't have to incarnate anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he didn't say this next part. I suspect we need to learn that because, first of all, you repeatedly practice in lives until, time is simultaneous, until you make that connection of like, oh, shoot, my mindset dictates what I get, because he has said elsewhere that he and his entity friends sometimes will like put on these little plays where they pretend they like create an environment and they just basically have like a theater type thing where they role play. And then sometimes one of their friends will forget that this is just a play and the others have to like go in and like bail them out, basically like pull them out. And so I'm wondering, like, is that part of what is that just part of our training as quote unquote gods and becoming like he says we are? Right. To not get lost. If you practiced in so many human lives, realizing, wait, there is a correlation between my thoughts and the physical events. Like, you practice waking up from the dream so that you're never stuck in a dream in the future when your entity friends aren't there to bail you out.
Right. It's sort of like a process of like socialization on the entity level. Well, it's like as a responsible player, you should be able to end the game.
Mm-hmm.
You could look at it as like a childhood, it's growth and development, but like, your childhood could look any sort of different ways with how you spend your time and how you play and how you learn. But like ultimately your ultimate goal is to become an adult of a certain kind, right?
Like learning responsibility,
Yeah.
no consequence.
And I think it gets back to like this idea that consciousness wants to have as many experiences as possible. So like we have to broaden ourselves. We have to grow and develop in our ability to handle power, and then our ability to have more experiences and deeper experiences and different experiences grows. And that's ultimately what consciousness, or what we're made of, wants.
That makes a lot of sense. Because then you can go and have like your little like, I'm just going to go be a tree for like 50 years. But like, it's different from being a tree for 50 years and not realizing what you actually are. And being a tree for 50 years and knowing exactly what you're doing being a tree for 50 years. It's like the artist thing, right? Like you have to learn the rules before you can like bend the rules or break the rules, right?
Yeah.
He did say that this is basically a grade school for gods. Like we're just in kindergarten here.
Yeah.
Grade School for Gods is that's a poignant, that should be a title to one of the books.
It is nice. It's got a little alliteration there too.
Yeah.
It's the name of the episode.
Grade school for gods in D&D.
I like that quote though. This is the one you just read, right? Like, this does not mean that the play is not real or that it should not be taken seriously.
Yeah, I read the end of that paragraph.
Yeah. Where it's, all of this being said, what actually happens in your life is as meaningful as you think it is. Like, it is actually as, like, present and poignant
Yeah.
as you feel it to be. It's just in addition to this other stuff.
Yeah. It reminds me of my pet peeve, and I've probably brought this up already, but it feels like a common thing for like someone in our Western culture to like see how big the universe is and then conclude from that we're not important, right? Because we're small in comparison. And it's like, you could go the other way and you could look at the most infinitesimal thing. And are you going to conclude that we're like super important because of it? It's like,
Western scientists are size queens.
yeah,
That's
like
what it is.
size is like, when it goes infinitely in each direction, it's meaningless in that sense.
Mhm. It's just scale,
But
not importance.
But like,
right?
but yeah, Seth is saying like every level does have its meaning, and like it's really reassuring to hear some of those things. He like really pushes back on like, like just because you're really old that you can't like start a new art or activity, or he's like, it's always the time when, if you want to start something, if you want to be a good singer, you don't say like, oh, I'll just wait till my next life. You start singing now, and then your next life, you're gonna be like more likely, one of those child prodigies that just like starts singing when they're like 2 years old.
Or, like how much more satisfying is it, narratively, for someone to like want something for a long time and then finally achieve it, as opposed to just like having it,
Right. Well, there is no just having it. Like, you have to develop it, whether it's in this life or the next time. And Seth is saying like, there's no point in waiting. If that's what you want, go for it.
Yeah.
Within this reality, it then brings about all kinds of creativity and development that could not appear otherwise. It must then propel itself from this system, however, through another act, another actualization on the part of itself that is three-dimensional. The meaning of the play is within you, therefore. A lot of this is just paraphrasing the same thing, but I like that idea. To the extent, therefore, that you allow the intuitions and knowledge of the multidimensional self to flow through the conscious self, to that extent, not only do you perform your role in the play more effectively, but you also add energy, insights, and creativity to the entire drama.
Yeah. Because like your role in what you're doing is important to like what's happening, like your contribution, because it's co-creative.
Yeah. Got anything else in that session?
I mean, my only note is sort of something that we talked about at the beginning when we were talking about all these different ways that we see creativity and like role playing happen in our everyday life, is just the idea that like whether or not you believe this is happening on a like metaphysical level, like taking these ideas and applying it to your life is an incredibly like radical thing to do and incredibly transformative. Like I think a lot more people should just think about their lives this way, period. That like a lot of this is made up and you can do what you want with the role that you have. Like, it's creative, it's changeable, it's moving,
Yeah. One thing that it occurs to me is like, when you're playing a game, there's no doubt about who's responsible and who has the power for that character within the game, right? Like, that doesn't get lost. Like, when you're playing that character, like, you're not going to be like blaming fate or anything. you know you're the one playing. And that's an important thing to keep in mind.
Oh, I don't know. I wouldn't fade a lot when I roll ones.
I guess you do bring that in, I guess, with the dice.
Yeah.
I forget about that.
The video gamers blame something called RNG a lot, which stands for random number generator, which is how, like, on the programming side, underneath the video game, how they determine quote unquote random events.
But that wouldn't have a correlate in the Sethian perspective, would it?
It would not, because I think
Yeah.
Seth would say that there is nothing truly random.
Yeah.
But video gamers definitely do blame fate and RNGesus, as they call it.
RNGesus. You have to create a RNGesus. Yeah.
Yeah.
I work with mentally ill and dangerous patients, and one thing I tell them a lot, or it just comes up enough that it bears mentioning, but like I really love this idea that like taking responsibility is taking power. Everyone wants power, but no one seems to want responsibility. They want to blame somebody else. But like when you actually say, no, I control this, I'm going to take the blame or the responsibility of like where I find myself in my life, that allows you to actually do things to get out of it. Whereas if you're just blaming it, you're going to get stuck.
Yeah, you have to have an internal locus of control.
Yeah. Do you guys want to like end at this session, or do you want to go a little longer, or what do you think?
There was just one thing I wanted to say, but it's not really in line with what we've been talking about.
Sure.
Go ahead.
There's a section here where he's talking about how we all have access to information beyond just our human selves. He says that each actor knows this instinctively, and there are periods set and allowed for within the play itself in which each actor retires in order to refresh himself. In these, he is informed through the inner senses of his other roles, and he realizes that he is far more than the self appearing in any given play. In these periods, he understands that he had his hand in the writing of the play, and he is freed from those assumptions that bind him while he is actively concerned with the drama's activities. These periods, of course, coincide with your sleep states and dreaming conditions, but there are also other times when each actor sees quite clearly that he is surrounded by props and when his vision suddenly pierces the seeming reality of the production. Reminds me a lot of what you were saying before about D&D, where like you go into a shop and then you all back out and like you break the fourth wall and you're like, okay, what do we do about this? Like, how do we move the story forward? But when I was reading this earlier this week, it reminded me of how there are like certain geniuses, human geniuses in our time, like Tesla, Edison, Albert Einstein, who have attributed a lot of their ideas to the dream state. Like, for example, Edison used to take, and they all used naps, like very liberally.
Interesting.
And like Edison, what he used to do was like sit on a chair and he would hold something metal, like pennies or keys or something, and then it'd be like a metal plate on the floor. So when he loses consciousness and he enters like what's called the hypnagogic state, which is, some of you might have experienced this, like when you are falling asleep and you start to have visual and audio hallucinations, but you're still somewhat aware that you're awake and it's not a fully formed dream. That's hypnagogia. So when Edison would enter that kind of hypnagogia and like fall asleep, he would let go of the keys in his hand and he'd clang on the plate. And at that moment, he'd wake up and he would just write down whatever ideas he had. And supposedly Edison did this, Da Vinci did this, Einstein, like a lot of people would like abuse dreams as like a fount of creativity.
Love it.
Yeah, that checks out.
Because some part of it that made sense to them.
Mhm.
Like they're like actively doing this. They're not just like, I mean, they maybe stumbled upon it at one point, but then they realized like there's value and there's power in doing this, and then it becomes intentional. It's funny like how like, you know, especially those scientific figures, they are deities of science, but like science kind of ignores that part of the process, that crucial part of the process where a lot of their creativity came from.
Well, yeah, if you look at the history of science too, a lot of the greatest figures had a foot both in natural science and in occultism. Like they almost always go hand in hand with really genius scientists.
Yeah.
Like even up to the modern day.
But a lot of that just gets shoved under the rug.
Yeah. I wonder, does that mean, is the dream space that you're in shared between these like different lives, do you think? Because that's sort of what it seemed to imply, you know?
Seth has said that the dream reality is a persistent reality that exists even when you're not there. And I took a Seth Dreams course with Robert Wagner, who used to be the president of, I forget the exact name, but it was a Lucid Dreaming Foundation. And he has said that what you can do when you become lucid in a dream is you can ask yourself to remember what happened in that dream before you went to sleep, and you can.
Yeah.
And he has also said that he and his like dream friends, people that he kind of like dreams with and talks to about dreams, have had shared dreams, even though they're like vastly geographically different. Where there was this one example that he taught in class, and I'm probably going to butcher the exact details, but they're not terribly important. Robert himself had a dream where he was sitting at a dining table with a whole bunch of people, and he started to describe what they were wearing. Like there was like a woman next to him with like a yellow dress or something, and several men. And then he woke up from that dream, and his friend called him that day and was like, "Hey, Robert, what did you dream about last night? Because I dreamed that you were at a table, and to your right was this lady wearing yellow, and like they had this shared dream." And I've spoken to some people who have had shared dreams, and it's like, well, how would you explain that except 1 in a trillion chance?
Right.
So it is like this persistent reality Seth says that you can go to. I imagine some people might be like, wait a minute, does that mean my dreams are not private? They are if you want them to be, because Robert Wagner also shared this other intriguing story where he would become lucid and go and visit his friends to see what they were doing. And one day he was like, oh, I'm going to visit this particular friend. And he was like flying in the dreams, like flying towards where that friend was, but he hit this invisible wall and he's like, what is going on here? So when he wakes up, he doesn't think too much of it. But that friend like gets in contact with him shortly afterwards. And he's like, yeah, I was trying this new thing where I intentionally set like the intention to have a private dream where no one could get in.
Wow.
And that was the same night that this was happening.
Interesting.
Very cool.
So it is sort of like a persistent like location.
It is a persistent location, yeah. But like the figures that appear in your dreams may or may not be like actual real people. They might be thought projections that are just extensions of your expectations and not like sentient in the way that we think they are.
Right.
But you also might run into your actual friend who is, of course, your sentient friend.
Right.
And location might be a little misleading.
Well, it's metaphorical
Yeah.
location.
Yeah.
Seth says there's a lot of different things happening in what we lump it all together as dreaming, but there's, like we were talking earlier about like translating this direct experience back into our waking outer ego consciousness. That happens in layers, this translating. So like we would have these different dreams, and when we start remembering our dreams, we'll be able to remember that surface level one best, and the one after that maybe second best in that order, because our way of understanding is connected to that one side. That's our show, but fear not, the never-ending conversation continues next week. If you're enjoying the show, please be so kind as to subscribe, like, rate, and review. And if you're feeling frisky, tell a friend. Contact us at implicatingthereal@gmail.com. You can support the show at patreon.com/implicatingthereal. We are doing our best, but whatever support you can lend helps us appreciably. We are not affiliated with the publishers or proprietors, but we encourage you to get the books. You can follow along as we endeavor to dive deep into the Sethian worldview, and there's really nothing like cultivating your own relationship with the material. Until next week, we wish you a fond good evening.